X is the new film from art house production company A24. It was written and directed by Ty West and stars Mia Goth, Jenna Ortega, and Brittany Snow, as well as Kid Cudi and Martin Henderson as a group of aspiring adult filmmakers who attempt to make a porno film at a rented house on a farm in Texas. All goes well until the televangelist TV-watching elderly couple who owns the property gets wise to what they're doing, and from there, well, this is a horror film, so you can imagine what happens next. So, A24 has become an interesting company in the last few years to me, in that they produce a lot of horror films that have what could best be described as kind of an artsy kind of feel to them, and they've become synonymous with what the media describes as intelligent horror. I don't really know what that means, other than perhaps yet another phrase that the media came up with to maybe make horror a little bit more palatable to hipsters. With that being said, I have noticed that there most assuredly is a high degree of what I'd call indie craftsmanship in the films that come from this company, and there's almost always sort of a cerebral quality in the films that plays to your thinking muscle. However, in the case of X, there ain't none of that pretension going on here. This film is for all intents and purposes a straightforward horror flick, and it's one that's executed brilliantly as far as I'm concerned. The first thing about this film is that it's a period piece set in 1979, and going to craftsmanship, it definitely feels like a film straight out of those times. I like this because when it comes to horror films, or really cinema in general, some of the best stuff to me came out in the 1970s. Everything hits home in the production design here, from clothing to cars to interior settings, and even down to how the actors portray their characters. As a matter of fact, I was watching this film and it got me thinking specifically about Rob Zombie. If you've seen any of his films, they all generally take place in the 70s and they all evoke that era, albeit in a somewhat exaggerated sort of a way. But X really had me thinking about the cinema of Zombie, where it almost felt like I was watching one of his movies, except without the sort of overblown trashiness that so often accompanies them. That's not a slight on Zombie. He does very good at that whole trailer park thing. But, to clarify, this film really is its own beast, and it's a much more straightforward in its representation of this era and of the story itself. Now, when it comes to the story itself, we've got a group of attractive young go-getters here setting out to cash in on the growing, or at that time in history, up-and-coming adult home video market. And so they set out on a road trip to a farm where leader of the group and executive producer of the film, Wayne, played by Martin Henderson, has rented a boarding house on the property to film his opus. I'm not really sure or understanding why they felt the need to rent this house on somebody's property where they could be discovered in their endeavor, when they could have just as easily gone to a hotel or, barring that, their own house. But I'm not really going to bitch about that too much, because obviously this location is kind of somewhat central to the plot. So we'll just chalk it up to because the script said so. From there, they begin filming their movie. And this ends up becoming one of those types of movies where you have a film within a film. So you'll actually get to see scenes from their masterpiece, The Farmer's Daughter. And I actually loved these little pseudo-porn segue pieces because, one, they really are shot in a way that seems very reflective of the time. Like, if you've ever seen a porn film from the 70s, they're pretty ridiculous, and watching the actors act in the film and give just these horrific performances is actually really fun to watch. Kid Cudi as Jackson, King Penis Extraordinaire. Hi, my car broke down. I was wondering if I could use your phone. Brittany Snow as the farmer's daughter. Oh, well, we don't have one, but I'm sure my father can give you a ride to town when he gets home. Do you wanna come inside? It's just brilliant, man. Secondly, I also like these segue pieces because in addition to providing levity to the proceedings, they also help with the pacing of the film, which can be a bit slow at points as we're getting to kind of know all of our players in the context of the real story here. But things start heating up when our lead character, Maxine, played by Mia Goth, has an unusual meeting with the wife of the elderly couple that owns the farm. Her name is Pearl, and interestingly enough, her character is also played by Mia Goth in some fairly good and convincing makeup to make her appear as an older woman. I think it was inspired to have Goth play both characters, as both characters, as we come to find out, have quite a bit in common, though they happen to be meeting at different times in their life. This lends to some kind of interesting plot twists in the film in regards to life, age, youth, regrets of the road not traveled or the chances not taken, and the sometimes envy or anger that can be created as we see people doing or living the life we once wished that we had. The film also explores the inherent connection between sex and death in its telling and its imagery, and though this is a straightforward horror film, it does give us, the audience, some kind of existential thoughts to kind of chew on a little bit. Regret and boredom can often lead to insanity, but it seems like a very specific type of insanity that the film is actually tending to suggest will eventually come to affect every one of us. What I loved most about this film is that it's clearly a reference point to all the great things that have come before it in horror, while adding its own sort of humanity-driven twist into the genre. I mean, I can see Texas Chainsaw Massacre in this movie, you know what I'm saying? I can see Sam Peckinpah in this film. I can see some nods to the great European filmmakers like Dario Argento or Lucio Fulci or Mario Bava. Ty West, in my opinion, does a really magnificent job here as a director, and this film really suggests to me that he knows this genre well, and this is almost kind of like his love letter to it. And I'm actually overall impressed with the actors in this film, as they all bring their own unique flavors to their characters, and they all have distinct personality traits that create some really great moments of dialogue regarding things like morality, love, and how we think about traditional relationships. And while I'm tempted to give a nod to Mia Goth in this film for pulling off dual roles and doing so very well, I really feel like the standout performance here for me is Martin Henderson as Wayne, the man with a plan set to make his way into fame and fortune as an adult film producer. His character is initially very slick, confident, and assured, fast-talking and motivated by purpose, but also has a moment or two of intense wisdom when it comes to understanding life and its various perplexities. He also seems like something of a balancing point between the older and the younger people in the film, as he's the one person in his middle ages. It's kind of like saying he's old enough to know better, but still young enough to take a chance. And maybe, visceral horror film though this may be, that's ultimately the point. You know, just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something, but it also doesn't mean that you should do nothing. I don't know, man. Maybe I'm overthinking this one. Maybe there is something to that whole, intelligent horror label. But as horror films go, this one is very good at its job, and it also gave me an intense cause for a pause to reflect on the meaning and purpose of this whole thing we call life. I think I'm gonna make a porn film now. Ultimately, X is a great way to spend a couple of hours on a lazy afternoon if you go for serious but fun horror that's an authentic throwback to arguably its best period, with moments of intense discomfort and absurdity to drive your mind to madness. And who knows, it might even make you think a little bit. This one is highly recommended. And that brings us to the conclusion of this episode of The Cinephiles. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video, and until next time, peace.